Hey folks, it's really a pleasure to be part of the Badmouth Poetry Series, and I want to thank Rebecca Aronson for reaching out to me about it. Um, I'm excited to share a few poems with you, and I think I'm going to focus today on poems that are about resilience and hope and promise, because this has been a really challenging time. But it is not the entirety of all things, and other things are coming. So I want to start by reading a poem not by me, but by Jane Kenyon, who's one of my very favorite poets, and it's called Ice Out. As late as yesterday, ice preoccupied the pond, dark, half melted, waterlogged. Then it sank in the night, one piece, taking winter with it. And afterward, everything seems simple and good. All afternoon, I lifted oak leaves from the flower beds and greeted like friends the green-white crowns of perennials. They have the tender, unnerving beauty of a baby's head. How I hated to come in. I've left the windows open to hear the peepers' wildly disproportionate cries. Dinner is over. No one stirs. The dog sighs, sneezes, and closes his eyes. So that was Ice Out by Jane Kenyon, and now I'm going to read a few of mine. The first one is a poem called Double Rainbow that just appeared in Moment magazine, actually, which I'm really excited about. Um, and it starts with an epigraph from Genesis, chapter 9, verse 13. And the epigraph is, I have set my bow in the clouds, and it shall serve as a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Yesterday, someone robbed me, and today, an afternoon of rain brings a double rainbow. Judaism has a blessing for that, also a prayer for keeping thieves away. We have words for everything, even for when words don't work. The story says it's a promise, this rainbow, no more world-ending floods. If our things are swept away, it's going to be by our hands, and we'll own our losses. But what does the second arc mean? The one with colors reversed that hangs pale alongside. What bargain is that? There are so many ways to destroy a world. What I mean is, may we only lose things. Please, may we all have enough time left. And next I'll read a poem called July Morning. We are in summer, and this poem captures a bit of what I think I feel in summer. And it was in my first book, We Were the People Who Moved. This poem is called July Morning. The noise of the cicadas is the day's noise, swelling into the white light of middle summer with the smell of the skunk killed in the road last night. Red cars along the curb in our driveways, the asphalt rough with gravel and gaps. You want to pull a warm leaf from these weighted trees and taste this morning. Inside with you, the refrigerator lurches into sound, calling out perhaps for another of its kind, as are we all. This next poem, The Back of God's Head, also begins with a biblical epigraph, this one from Exodus. And God said, here is a place with me. I will cover you with my hand until I have passed by. And I will take away my hand, and you will see my back, but my face will not be seen. And the idea here is that we can only ever see the divine, the biggest meaning of the universe, indirectly. That if we were ever faced with the astonishing nature of the universe directly, we wouldn't be able to handle it. And yet it is available indirectly all the time. Late Friday afternoon, and the cicadas roll sound over the wash of cars from Route 29. Plus, someone's playing Let's Stay Together in another part of the valley, loud enough for the mountains to share. It's still daytime, indirectly. Everything is first shadow. Sometimes it must be a truck on the highway, the of industry. And the insects overhead are working as hard as ever. They don't put down their tools. They don't know Al Green, even if they're bent the same way toward persuasion. Evening takes a step. Out across the lawn, grass reaches up unhurried, moved by the wind that holds the note. And that poem, just like this one I'm about to read, that was from my new book of poetry, Some Unimaginable Animal. This next one, Things Are Very Far Apart, is about just the vast emptiness of the solar system, the universe, in terms of physical matter. And yet the things that do exist exert this enormous force in our lives. I mean, here we spend our entire lives on this planet. We're affected by the moon. We couldn't be here without the sun. And so the universe is empty and full. It's called Things Are Very Far Apart. I mean the moon, the sun. I mean everything. The universe is empty as a bowl, but without the bowl. A little dust doesn't crowd a room. Space was named for itself, and yet it's full as a bowl. Here we are strung to that boiling pivot 93 million miles away, but still bound. And there's enough light here that everything lives and sees. And if you looked at that light, you wouldn't see anything else. Here we are, all nothing even to the moon, and still the oceans try to rise to it. And that poem too has that idea of if we look directly at powerful things, it can be really hard and dangerous. But if we look indirectly, there's power that we can appreciate and that can give us life. This next poem, which just appeared in the current issue of Prairie Schooner, is a poem about apocalypses that didn't get us. A lot of people are talking about how apocalyptic the times we're in are. So this is a poem about apocalypses that failed. It's called The B-Movie Apocalypses All Failed. And I grew up on B-movies and love them. When the dead awoke in their graves, they were too weak to dig their way out, and even the ones not yet buried were awfully tired. Meanwhile, the giant spiders struggled to contend with gravity, their organs too heavy now to function, and anyway, they were not well adapted to drink larger prey. Their starvation left a lot of cleanup. Sanitation workers demanded better benefits. UFOs landed, but their weapons only worked on silicon-based life forms, so they left again with a kind of shrug. All of our buildings were intact. We wandered the streets stunned, knowing we were still expected at work on time. Survivalists were dismayed. Who knew ghosts were too sad to focus on vengeance, or that werewolves only wanted to howl? Monsters have no use for us, is what we learned. This next poem is also from my book, Some Unimaginable Animal, and it takes place at the Jewish holiday of Passover. Passover this year. it finally snows 5 days after the first day of spring, and we're like, where have you been? Because by now we've shelved the snow angels. We were thinking more like cherry blossoms. The fact is, we've adjusted our calendars 7 leap months in 19 years because this is supposed to be spring. So anyway, we sit down together at a table where everything's renewal, renewal, and under the table our boots slush the floor and leave salt footprints. Well, we're used to contradiction. There's salt water on the table too. We carry our tears with us in little bowls. We lug them across national borders and the calendar. Meanwhile, the snow follows us just to say, get over yourselves. We all have our problems. And speaking of cherry trees, I'm a bit obsessed with cherry trees, and I've written many, many poems about them. I'll just share one, unless you count that last one, and then this is the second one. The cherry trees in Glover Park. Glover Park is my neighborhood in Washington, D.C. The cherry trees in Glover Park. The March cold snap hasn't hurt them, it seems. Or it has, but hurt doesn't hold buds closed. This next poem is called This Happened to Me, also in Some Unimaginable Animal. And yeah, I won't say anything about it. This happened to me. It was one of those days in March where I just wore a light jacket because I didn't mind being a little cold and optimistic. And then it turned out I didn't even need the jacket. Outside, people were at outdoor tables, metal outdoor chairs, leaning into them like into cushions. The forecasters were predicting 1/2 foot overnight. But during this day, dogs were at the distant ends of their leashes, dogs everywhere. The lights changed and people rambled into crosswalks. We opened shop doors, windows. We were just going to have to close them up again later, but it was fine. I'm telling you, this happened to me. Other things too, but let's start with this. And then I'll share one last poem with you. It's called Souciance, which is not a word, but if it was, it would be the opposite of insouciance. And I'll explain that through the epigraph, which is a Wikipedia entry. The Wikipedia entry says, the cicada has represented insouciance, in other words, nonchalance or indifference, since classical antiquity. What indifference? The heat of the day shivers with their calling, each one to another, and though the branches of the trees seem unbowed, their noise is the weight and the breath of the rising morning. And if the ant is busy gathering for the winter, the ant has it easy. There is no division of labor among the cicadas. Each one has to do it all. And so they take to the branches, opening up the wood for their breakfast, calling out for mates in the ecstatic heat. Under them, the ants do their jobs, and wave after wave of sound breathes out from the trees. The day opens wider, the sun burning like everything else. Thanks, everybody. It's been a pleasure and an honor, and I wish you health and strength and well-being. Take care.